Namo tassa. In this video, I will talk about the notion of faith. That came about from a short video I watched about doctor scientist who enjoyed studying Jesus' last moments, and he's talking with a Christian priest, and at some point basically the priest asked him, "Do you have faith?" And that doctor scientist respond, "No, we cannot understand that notion. For him it's too much beyond and not enough rational." And then of course he mentions that classic sentence for many and would be typical for a scientist, which is to say, "I only believe what I see." So in that sense, I want to compare a little bit the notion of faith between those religions, and it's more again the Buddhist way compared to the other ones. As it goes usually that a lot of people, especially the ones who don't know anything about Buddhism but still will throw their own ignorant opinion as thinking the same like for everybody else or every other religion, that notion of faith, and basically one word that we add in Buddhism around that many times is exactly to be careful not to fall into blind faith. So in that sense, I would say that for most religions, that's kind of the way it works. And where the misunderstanding happens is, again, as I meant, that most people, even Buddhist practitioners, don't understand the right meaning of the faith in Buddhism or the way the Buddha asked them to have. So you could see in many other religions, and for example we will take the Christianity in that way, what do people do basically, or what they mean that they have been asked by their God or whatever, and in the scriptures is to pray this way and to pray this way, and you see them praying a lot in whichever religion, and they recite the texts, the scriptures, and basically they are asked to have that faith. But most of the time, of course, it comes in a sense of almost like a threat. You should have faith in your God or in Jesus, whatever, because if you don't, then this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And there are a few people who have mentioned a few things around that I find pretty good, a good way. There was also a good way to put it from Ricky Gervais as a comedian when he was asked about that it's funny how it happens the same, but it is very specific to each religion. But basically, it's like a threat that if you don't have faith in that God and what they said supposedly, or what is written, then this is going to happen or this is going to happen. So they are like, Jesus loves you, But then if you don't do this or if you do that, then you're going to be punished. That sounds a bit like a nice joke to get people in line and to try to have that forced faith. So I'm not saying that that doesn't happen in Buddhism, unfortunately. And there is that aspect of the classic organized religion way to behave like that. But in Buddhism, yes, you are asked to have faith, as it is one of what we call the paramis, which are the really good qualities a human should develop during their life to become a better person, a wiser person, and ultimately over time or over different lives will get you closer to the final goal. So there starts already the difference between Buddhism and Buddha's teachings compared to the other religions. So understand that what happens with Buddhism and the Buddha is not like that, like other religions with a God Almighty and He has told you to do this and that, otherwise watch out, beware. First, again, the Buddha actually kept it very simple and asked people to keep it very simple. But again, it's down the line, as it is always, as I've explained before. It happens also even in regular life when you have a big boss who started something. So the big man, inspired, original founder, created something, and then you got, of course, a few people around, execs, and then it goes a bit down the ladder. But then over time, things get a bit watered down and misconceived or misinterpreted, and then as people are not the original real deal person, then they are not as perfect, you could say. And then as typical humans, there's always the big part of that ego again, the conceit that will manage to take a bit over. So then people will start to transform things and try to sway the original teachings or rules or whatever to try to make it kind of their way, or try to assert their power or their powerful position, which is the classic human way, unfortunately, for most, as being regular humans, weak-minded, with all that ego and ignorance. But originally, again, the Buddha made it very simple, and he was, of course, the perfect kind of being that way, with only good intention, and what he did was only out of loving kindness, metta, and compassion, karuna, and sympathetic joy, mudita. He wanted to help as many people to be better people, better humans, and happier and less suffering. That's all. That's the basics. And so he kept it very simple, asking that, they shouldn't, down the line start to build so many things and, statues or whatever. There's no point for these things. Of course, now people justify it by saying that people do it exactly out of faith and recognition for what the Buddha did, and then it inspires other people. Okay, fair enough. But again, the main point is that there is some Buddha's teachings and a practice to be serious about, to do regularly, so that this will help you exactly to get on the path to become a better human being and a stronger human beings, only to make you more at peace and wiser, and just to erase the suffering from your life. And that's all there is. And that was the point for the Buddha. As it is summed up in one famous quote also in that famous book, the Dhammapada, that collects all the main quotes from the discourses and all the teachings of all the Buddhas, even before the last historical one. It was always the same, refrain from bad intention and bad deeds, and concentrate on the good, doing good and being good, and progressing yourself to become a wiser being, and getting rid of your impurities in your mind, like that. So exactly, that's the teaching. And so the notion of faith in Buddhism, despite seeing people a little bit practicing blindly just because it's part of their culture and they have been educated that way, and so they will just pray in a sense that they will recite the scriptures and the text too because they don't know better, and ultimately, unfortunately, because they are still a bit weak-minded, they think that they will go for the lesser and easier way to be a Buddhist, which is exactly that. It's easy. You learn the text, or you read them and recite them, and you think you're a good Buddhist, and then you go to the temple, the monasteries, and then you make offering to the monks, and you think you're going to get some merits, supposedly. That's your merits. But again, I explained that in another video, and that's not the real way of being a true Buddhist and the way the Buddha meant originally, because he taught a technique. There is a path, like for regular people, for everyday life situation, the Eightfold Noble Path that can be applied, but exactly in that path, or in one way technique, at the end there is some specific practice to be done, and that is exactly back to the teaching of the Buddha, that way, that led to meditation, the famous meditation, which again now it's all over the place because it has become such a big business, just like yoga has been before that. So, but again, it's very simple and straightforward. But the Buddha would have encouraged people to practice the technique of meditation that was taught. There can be a few variations, but there is some basic, and you could say we call it vipassana at the end, which is not a technique per se, but it's what you're supposed to get to. And ultimately, that's where the faith comes in. So the Buddha himself, of course, would say that you don't need to have faith in him or in his words, and that's the point again. Yes, he had many speeches, but he gave a technique and a way of being, a way of life that would help you, again, for your own sake, to become a better human and to erase as much as possible the suffering from your life and become a happier person, more at peace. But it requires that practice. So in that sense, again, the Buddha would have said, I don't ask you to just believe blindly my words. And the point of this technique and practice as a Buddhist is exactly to check for yourself. So that's where actually Buddhism becomes a scientific, rational way of being and practice. So it's not about the blind faith in something abstract or in some words or in a figure, somebody. The main point is to have faith in the technique that you practice, in the way of being, but to check for yourself that it works. So you're not asked to believe blindly the words or whatever that in theory things are gonna work. There are those famous Pali quotes around that. Akaliko. So check for yourself. Check for yourself in a rational way by practicing seriously. In that sense, have the proper faith in the practice, in what you're doing, so you can do it the proper way. And then you will see for yourself if that brings benefits in your life. So this is for your own sake. So in Buddhism, it's not supposed to be about any blind faith like that. And there is no threat. Yes, some things are mentioned about higher realms of existence, better realm of existence, or lower realms of existence, more painful, or hell. But again, it's not in a form of threat like in other religions. It's just the way it is. It's just the reality of life, what we call the Dharma. And that's exactly what the Buddha was teaching. Again, not asked to believe that blindly, but that's just what the Dharma is. That's just the law of nature. That's the way existence works. And again, practicing or behaving one way or the other will show that to you. So you can decide not to care about anything, and usually you will see the certain consequences that happen to you. Maybe not the best. Or if you practice actually being a good human being and try to become wiser and keep good intentions, the 4 Brahma Viharas, the 4 highest virtues, again, Metta, Karuna, Mudita, and Upekkha, equanimity, understanding that nothing is personal at the end actually. That's exactly about being humble and just keep the faith in that technique of meditation, and then you will be able to see actually some benefits coming to you, and maybe a better life, a more peaceful mind, and less suffering, and in general a better way to handle things, everyday lives. So that's the notion of faith in Buddhism in that sense. There is no blind faith that way in Buddhism, but it's just in a sense that when you practice, you should practice diligently, seriously, with the right motivation and enthusiasm, understanding that this is for your own good. But then it's up to you, and you will see if you get results or not. There's no threat. So it's just about check for yourself. And then compared to that guy who said, I just believe what I see, that's where actually, again, science has its limitation compared to Buddhist practice as it is known, and as some scientists back in the day, especially when Buddhism got known all over the world, and some people reported certain unusual, extraordinary things or feats from Buddhist monks, some scientists, of course, typically wanted to check that because that sounded so impossible. But that's exactly to compare that side too. There were some objective scientists at the time. They came with the right machine, the technology of the time, and they measured things and they could witness things with their own eyes. But exactly there was a reason why this has been a bit shut down too, because of the agenda. I will have to remind you maybe almost in every video that the world agenda right now of the people who are leading this world and the goal for the world population is totally at the opposite of Dharma, totally at the opposite of what the Buddha taught. As I mean again, the Buddha's teachings are about becoming a better human being, a stronger human being, independent, strong mind, with a lot of capacities, both mental and physical. But the agenda of the people who are ruling the world now is exactly at the opposite of that. To make good, dumb, obedient, modern slaves. So that's why there is still something about shutting down or not talking too much about what the practice of the technique in Buddhism and meditation can bring to people. But then those scientists, they are not meditators for many of them. Of course, we get more and more now, and that's why some things get a bit better or clearer. But exactly that notion of saying, I only believe what I see, as a regular human, that's very limited and very immature. It's like children level. So you see only what you can see, and that's why it took a lot of time to start to discover a few newer notions in science, in physics, exactly because now, of course, it's part of the modern physics, but there are all these fields and factors that really affect the whole physics of the world, but got discovered only lately exactly because you cannot see it with your own eyes. And it took a long time to develop some kind of machines and technology that could start to measure and render visually something for those scientists to see it and to understand. So that's one aspect, and the other aspect is also, again, as it relates to Buddhism or the teachings we have and in the practice, that what you see is what you see with your eyes, but it doesn't matter, because the point is what happens behind the eyes in your brain, and it's all about interpretation and perceptions. As we say in Buddhism, perception is a big factor in understanding how the human mind works, and how it controls your life and your reality, your perception of reality, or what is real or not. So those very ignorant scientists who like to say that they only believe what they see, many times what they see is subject to their own ignorant perceptions and what they don't know, so they cannot conceive. So it's far beyond the intellectual capacities. On the other hand, as a proper Buddhist, and if you practice seriously meditation at a very deep level, when you reach a very, very high level of concentration, you actually can do things that the science can't explain, as it is known anyway. And that's for a reason. But again, you see, the scientists can't explain it. And okay, if only they can see something with their own eyes, they will say that this is something that they want to believe. Although again, many of them will start to say that they think there is a trick somewhere. So that's again the limitations of the scientific mind. Whether they believe what they can see with their eyes or not, that doesn't really matter, because they are very limited. On the other hand, as a Buddhist who can meditate at very high level, you can develop capacities and you can do things with energies, for example, as kind of implied earlier, that energy that's around but that you cannot see, actually, electromagnetism and all of this. So very high level practitioners can master and control energies different way and can do many different things, very extraordinary or called supernatural, but the scientist won't be able to see it with his eyes anyway. And on the other hand, exactly as a proper Buddhist, keeping humble, you are basically not meant, but it's about coming naturally, that you don't want to show off. The notion of miracles in other religions, like in Christianity, yes, there are miracles in that sense. That's what some people are able to do when they reach very, very high spiritual level. But there is a point, again, of not being about showing off miracle, or then, as some did in every religion, to use their capacities to create miracles just to get fame or money or anything like this, popularity. So that's also another one in Buddhism. It's not about showing off any supernatural powers, called supernatural only because the majority and those scientists cannot really explain it and understand it properly. So, just to say that on the scientific side, for those who say I can believe only what I see, it's very, very limited, it's very childish level, and that doesn't bring us very far. That's just limiting. Buddhism, of course, can go far beyond that, but the proper Buddhist practice, actually, as having faith in the technique that the Buddha taught, which is for your own sake, that is very rational, scientific, objective, to understand the real reality of existence, of our own nature. So that is something about discovering for yourself, checking for yourself that reality. Nobody asks you to believe that blindly, just on the spot, just believe the words. No, that's the point of the practice. So you can check it for yourself, and you can go far beyond what is still common knowledge now. And of course, again, it's still for your own sake, for becoming a better human being, a wiser human being, only for the good. And hopefully you can reach the highest level, which is beyond that basic apparent reality from the regular perception of human beings. And then there is so much more beyond all that.